Okay, good evening everybody, and welcome to the first CYP Scrutiny Committee of this municipal year. Thank you all for coming this evening. Hopefully we won't be too disturbed by the cheers from the cricket ground opposite. I have apologies from Councillor Acton and from Councillor Shirley Proctor. As far as I'm aware, there are no other apologies. Before we start, and because there are one or two new members for this committee, I wondered if we could just perhaps have a quick round the table and introduce ourselves. So my name's Denise Weston. I'm a councillor for Broadheath Ward in Trafford, and I chair this committee. I'm going to pass you on to my more glamorous partner next door.
I really appreciate that, thank you. I'm Councillor Thomas Carey from Village Ward, and I am the Vice Chair, my first Vice Chair role. Very excited, thank you.
Tim Rhodes, Interim Statutory Scrutiny Officer.
John Holden, Councillor for St Mary's Ward.
Joanne Bennett, Salemore Councillor.
Stephen Longdon, Brooklands Councillor.
Karina Carter, David Hugh West Councillor, Lead for Education, and I'm here in an observational capacity.
Karen Samples, Director of Education for Trafford.
Jed Rowney, Interim Director of Children's Services for Trafford.
Rebecca Domain, Associate Director of Commissioning at Trafford Clinical Commissioning Group.
Claire Ball, Interim Specialist Commissioner for Children's Clinical Commissioning.
Sadia Khan, I'm the Parent Governor Representative on the Scrutiny Committee.
I'm Karen Barclay, I'm Bowden Ward Councillor. I'm here representing Health Scrutiny Committee.
Thanks so much. Councillors Blackburn, David Hume, East Ward.
Councillor Adele New, Bucklow St Martins.
Councillor Jane Dillon, David Hume East.
Councillor Catherine Hines. I'm here in my capacity as the exec member for Children's Services. I'm not actually a member of the committee, but I'm here to sort of to observe and to listen to what obviously what's being said.
Alex Murray, Democratic and Scrutiny Officer.
Fabiola Fuschi, Scrutiny Officer.
Thank you, everybody. So the first item on the agenda is item 2, to note the membership of the committee. There was a report attached amongst these mountains of paperwork. Is that noted? Yep. Okay. And agenda item 3 is the terms of reference. These were agreed at the annual council meeting on the 22nd of May. Are these noted?
Aye.
And item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest at all? No? Okay. Oh, sorry, Jay.
Just that my child has SEN and is also under CAMS. I just think I should mention it.
Thank you. May I also declare that I work in a school outside of the borough supporting children with special educational needs.
Just to declare that I'm a full-time secondary school teacher outside of the borough also.
And I'm a school teacher in Trafford as well.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I'm not aware. Oh, sorry, Stephen.
Sorry, Chair. I just wanted to say, perhaps I should have said this at the apologies earlier on this evening. Councillor Shirley Proctor has not both the grounds and the buildings due to disabled parking being used by, I understand, non-disabled users, and therefore not being able to attend this evening. I just wanted to highlight my concern around that and, ask that is dealt with as a matter of urgency. It shouldn't be the case that any disabled person, regardless of whether they're councillor or service user, shouldn't be able to access this building and therefore this meeting. I just wanted that recorded for the minutes, please, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I have contacted both the leader of the council and the executive member for inequalities, and I do know that she's already taken steps to rectify the issue. So thank you for reminding me of that. I'm not aware that we have any questions from members of the public. Okay, and I'm not aware of any urgent business. Okay, we're whizzing through this, aren't we? Right. Item 7, to receive and approve the minutes from the previous meeting on the 19th of March. Has everybody had a chance to have a look at the minutes? Okay, and are we happy to approve them? Yeah, thank you. Okay. So I'm going to go on to the first presentation of the evening. We have a rather large and report on our mental health services for children and young people. And I'm going to invite Claire Ball and Rebecca Demain to present highlights of the report, hopefully, and give the opportunity afterwards. We'll let you do your presentation first and then give members the opportunity to ask questions, if that's okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the first page of the report discusses our local transformation plan, which has recently been refreshed into its 4th edition, and we have lately received notification from the NSPCC that we have been given a green rating for our plan. Our national access target for children and young people accessing mental health services is below where we should be by March 2019. However, this is a data issue. Data has to be flowed to the mental health single data set, and unfortunately not all services in Trafford are flowing their data. So because of this, and because it is a national issue, NHS Digital have compiled a one-off manual data capture, which has allowed services to flow their data manually. And as a result, as you can see, our access target has actually gone up to 37.2%, which is above the threshold where we should be at this point in time. The crisis care pathway, which is a GM pathway, has recently been launched just in the last week. There are lots of different components to this pathway, but of those components, what we commission is the all-age mental health liaison service. Some of you may have heard of it previously as RAID, but this is a service that works in A&E departments and urgent care departments to make sure that children and young people who present in mental health crisis get the timely access to support that they need, as they would with any other health condition that they were presenting with. Over the past 12 months, we've had a fairly comprehensive training offer for our workforce, which is delivered through our local transformation plan. I won't read out all of the things that we've had on offer, but there's a mixture of things that have been commissioned locally, but also training that's been made available through Greater Manchester, through the iThrive Hub and the Transforming Care agenda. So that's training around things like community education treatment reviews and the dynamic risk support database. Our latest training offer has been mental health first aid, which was absolutely a waiting list for that because it was so well taken up. Onto our specialist commission support services. Obviously, Healthy Young Minds, our CAMS service, has seen an incredible increase in referrals over the years. And that has impacted on waiting times for services. We've also, over the past year, had unprecedented levels of both sickness and vacancies within the service. It's not a Trafford specific issue with regard to the vacancies. Unfortunately, we are finding up and down the country that mental health posts are becoming more difficult to employ. The Community Eating Disorders Service, of which we're a part of, continues to perform really well. We go beyond our waiting time standards, which are for urgent and routine cases, achieving 100% against the time frame. There is a slight issue around the Eating Disorders Service going forward because the Pennine community contracts are transferring over to Manchester Foundation Trust. And for the Eating Disorders Service, it's a less straightforward transfer because we are a tripartite contract, which means we commission with Stockport and Tameside and Glossop, because the Eating Disorders Service has to be commissioned on a population footprint, and Trafford alone wouldn't have the population to commission a service. So we are working through that, and there is going to be a 1-year extension to the contract to allow us to do a safe transfer over to MFT. Perinatal mental health in Trafford is delivered through our Healthy Young Minds service and our health visiting service, and we have recently been recognised as a rare jewel, and that's because not many places in the country have that parent-infant service. Onto our third sector providers. 42nd Street and Trafford Sunrise, like our specialist service, have seen increased referrals. They've also seen increased complexity of referrals. So particularly for services like 42nd Street, that means they're having to hold on to their young people that bit longer because of the complexity of the issues that they're presenting with. We have Couth, which is our online offer, which is great. We don't have any waiting times for that service because it's an online offer. It's confidential and it's available until 10 o'clock every night, every day of the year. We have a project that we commission through Home Start, which is our baby bond project, and that's around perinatal mental health and early attachment. And we've been invited to take part in a GM waiting times pilot. We were able to decide where to invest that funding. And because additional funding has gone into the Healthy Young Minds service to create a number of posts, we decided that we would invest in our third sector providers. So 42nd Street and Trafford Sunrise are going to be taking part in that waiting times pilot, with additional investment for increased staffing. And then the work plan for this year and beyond is not solely the items on that slide, but these are the big things that we need to get working on and that we need to achieve. So the autism and social communication pathway, which is detailed in the paper, phase 2 of that pathway will be launched in September, which means that it will be accepting referrals from Senkos. The single point of access is something that both service users, parents and providers have been saying that we need to have in Trafford, and it certainly fits with what we want to do for our long-term plan. So we are beginning work on the single point of access. We've convened together a multi-aid at the end of this month to start that work. The PIM pathway and early attachment service, currently our perinatal infant mental health pathway isn't an integrated pathway. We have part of the provision sitting in our Healthy Young Minds CAMS service and the rest in health visiting. So what we want to do is create an integrated pathway, and we also have secured funding for a number of additional posts which will allow us to offer an early attachment service in Trafford, and that's in line with GM and national good practice. The transforming care agenda, really important for children and young people with autism and or LD. We want to make sure that we're embedding community education treatment reviews, which is where a young person is at risk of admission to a Tier 4 bed or a 52-week placement. So we want to make sure that those young people are receiving their community education treatment review. We also have, which I've discussed in the paper, the Ealing model, which we've been asked to adopt in Trafford. And the GMI Thrive programme, which we've committed to delivering in Trafford. We want to continue to embed that, and we've been given some funding from GM to employ a subject matter expert. And what we want to do in Trafford is to use that funding with schools so that they can help schools to embed the Thrive model, and also around early help services. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions? Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. Could I just ask the early attachments posts, are they going to be temporary or permanent?
Currently, they will be temporary. The funding that we've received has been awarded on a fixed term basis, and the reason for that is because of the transfer over to Manchester Foundation Trust. The total of the additional posts was over £1 million for Healthy Young Minds and the Early Attachment Service. So we wanted to have them for the 12-month period to make sure that we've got the contractual governance in place around that.
And are you able to access the the necessary staff for those posts? Bearing in mind you're saying that there are issues getting others anyway.
We won't know until we go out to recruitment, which we haven't done yet because we want to get the pathway right before we get the staff in. Yeah. Like all mental health posts, there are difficulties with recruitment, to be honest. But some of the posts needed for the early attachment service we do already have in place. So within our CAMS service, we have the specialist parent infant senior psychologist. In the health visiting service, we have a parent infant health visitor, and the baby bond project that we've commissioned through Home Start, that's another key post within the early attachment service. So some of the posts are already in place.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Carey.
Hi, thank you. You do a great job in your department. I work in a school and we see all the different routes that the young people use to access you. But when you were talking about the waiting lists and things like that, it's really difficult. And reading your document and the things you're saying, all the different facets that add to that, I can see how difficult that is. I think the Couth thing's amazing, and that service that we're paying or somebody else pays in to provide. I'm just not sure how well it's advertised. That's one of the problems that I see. I mean, we advertise it all over our website at school. The children can go to places to get it. It's really difficult as a parent, I think, to know what's available out there. And I know we have our Trafford directory page, all this stuff, and I know you've got other things that maybe are more important to think about, but I wonder how we can get the information out to families that these are routes that we can go down. I don't know. Thank you.
We have actively encourage Couth, and they do have a worker that can go into schools to promote the service. And of course, there is the Trafford Family Service directing around Instagram for us. And they were able to do something very clever, which went a little bit over my head, that meant that it would only be Trafford children that could access the service through the advert. I'm not quite sure what the algorithm was, but they assured me that it wasn't going to be children from, say, Devon accessing this service. They have had to recently pull back from that Instagram advertising purely because of the number of hits that were going through to the website. However, we are hopeful that they will be able to reinstate that now that we're into the new financial period for them. But I would say that the Trafford Service Directory is the main port of call for our services. And of course, through our local transformation plan as well, where we detail all our commissioned offer.
Thank you for that. Can I just ask a bit of a supplementary on that one? Do we still have old-fashioned advertising like posters and leaflets in schools, in pharmacies, in libraries, as well as, because not everybody is comfortable accessing the internet, are they?
Certainly, I have seen in libraries, but it is down to the provider around the advertising and the marketing and publicity of their service. If we felt that the message was coming back strongly that we needed more paper-based resources, then we would talk to them about that in our assurance meetings and ask them to provide that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Longdon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My question is just about the satisfaction of the service from the service users. I notice on page 17 of the report, you have been given a green rating by the NSPCC for the fourth annual edition of the Local Transformation Plan. And they stated that this was because it was judged to have a good analysis of the needs of the most vulnerable children, which was clearly used to inform service provision. So first of all, I wanted to congratulate you for getting that a green award. But secondly, could you just pull out, if you have it with you, the plan in terms of what are the key headlines that service users are saying about this service? I appreciate what you said about the engagement earlier on, but I'm just interested what's come out of those surveys.
Could I ask which service in particular? Do you mean our Healthy Young Minds service, or 42nd Street, or Couth, or?
So the one that the NSPCC report is referring to.
So the local transformation plan is a really large document. Actually, I included it as an appendix just because it is so huge. So within that, we have our "You Said We Did" survey, which is where we publish what young people have told us and what we've done about it. So, for example, Couth was directly commissioned as a result of the "You Said We Did" because children told us that they wanted more online support, that they didn't necessarily want face-to-face support, and they wanted support out of hours. But in terms of service user satisfaction, that would come down to each individual service rather than the actual transformation plan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Barclay.
Thank you, Chairman. You mentioned that there's been unprecedented increases in staff sickness and obviously difficulty filling posts, and that's really contributed to the increase in waiting times. Could I just ask, is that sickness potentially work related? Do you investigate it? And also, what kind of support do you give to staff? Because obviously they're in an incredibly stressful job and may well kind of experience their own stresses through that. So could you explain, please?
I would have to get more detail from the provider because obviously I'm not managing staff. I do know through our monitoring meetings, some of the vacancies will be down to stress related, whether that's because of what's going on at work or home. As we know, it quite often isn't one single thing that can cause stress. So I would have to get more detail on that. I can say are now returned to work and are back in service. One of them was a long-term sickness absence, so that has had to be carefully managed. And obviously those staff who have come back into work after their absence have been supported through phased returns, so they haven't gone straight back into their full caseload. But again, that does impact on waiting times. And but as to the support mechanisms that are in place from Pennine Care, who are the employer, I would have to refer that question to them, if that's okay.
Councillor New.
Hi, I'm just wondering, on the perinatal parent and infant mental health, it says here that there is a weekly mental health drop-in. I'm just wondering, where is that?
It's at the Life Centre in Sale.
In Sale.
Yes,
Okay.
it's
Again,
every Friday.
Yeah, again, do we have any way of advertising that?
It is advertised through the health visiting service. It perhaps doesn't say in this paper, but it is. It's for parents with infants up to the age of 1.
Yeah.
So usually the health visitor, where they've recognised a parent who might be low mood or needs some support around mental health, will signpost them to that. Also, the early help hubs will signpost. But as to whether there's any kind of paper advertising of it, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that open for any parent with a young child to attend, or do you have to be referred or signposted?
No, it's totally open. It's drop in. There's no referral needed, and very informal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dillon, did you have a question?
Just a couple of things. Just the autism and social communication pathway. I noticed somewhere in this huge transformation document, I'm just interested in when these kids are potentially diagnosed, is there anything planned for post-diagnosis support in any way? Because I noticed it was down, but there was not a tick by that one. Thank you.
We are working on that. We have a task and finish group around the autism and social communication pathway that meets fairly regularly, and we do have post-diagnostic support as an agenda item on that. There is parent workshops that parents are able to attend. They are staffed by a member of our speech and language therapy service. We've also commissioned some Riding the Rapids training from our early help hub for parents. And in addition, there will be posts going into the community paediatrics service, which will be around supporting parents. There is an official appointment within the pathway following diagnosis, which is called Sharing the News, which is where obviously the result of the ADOS assessment is provided. And the idea is that the parent is then signposted onto any necessary support services, but we do recognise that we need to do more around that.
Thank you both very much for coming, for your very comprehensive reports and for your very reassuring answers to our questions. You are more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but if you want to get off home, please do so.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask Jed Rowney, the Interim Corporate Director of Children's Services. I'm reading that from a list because I get muddled up with everybody's title. And he's going to give us an update.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's important to say that we agreed with you, Chair, about bringing an update report to every scrutiny committee, if that's helpful. Colleagues will obviously be aware of the Ofsted report and the inspection that happened in March. There was a bit of a delay in its publication because of the PERDA period, but it was finally published in May, and it led to some soul searching across the service and the authority. But as a bit of background, it probably links in to some of the discussions about special education needs as well, in it putting into a context. We've got over 55,000 young people in Trafford from 0 to 17. And obviously that number changes, but around that 55,500 young people. And of them, the bulk of them are in schools. And of that number, some are eligible for free school meals, some are eligible for the services you've just been hearing about. And also we've got a number with special educational needs, which comes into the later report on the task and finish group. In terms of children in care, which is what Ofsted focused on, and children in need, we've got the numbers are relatively small, but they are a real concern in terms of the services that we provide, how we work together with partners, and how we deliver services to the children and their families and make a difference to their lives. And that's the area that Ofsted focused on. And nothing you won't be aware of already. That's what Ofsted found. They came and were several weeks here, and what they said was those judgments. Now, the judgments are narrowed down to the 1-word or 2-word responses, but the key one is at the bottom there. The overall effectiveness of the service was felt to be inadequate. And obviously that triggers a whole range of issues. The Department for Education gets involved. They issue a letter to the authority about what we're going to do about it. Ofsted will say how they're going to come back and what the local authority needs to do to get from being inadequate back to being a good or outstanding authority. But without pulling any punches, and you've seen from the slides, Ofsted said we needed to improve in a lot of areas. And the bulk of it was around leadership, looking at the data, the information. And what we've found, and in my time here, I've seen the same thing, is that we have some tremendous data, a whole host of documents can come out, but were we using it and turning that data into intelligence that would inform our plans and our expectations of staff and then our delivery of services. But again, I won't read through all of them, but they were the key headlines that Ofsted came up with, about oversight, about responses, and it goes on about our assessments and the effectiveness of the meetings and responses to what happened when children go missing, timeliness. So there's quite a thread running through that we knew about a lot of things. When a child came into care, they were getting good service. But it was that what happened before that, how we worked together with health, with police, with other partners, and delivered a quality service. And did we listen? Bottom one there is a key one. It's come through a lot. Did we listen to children? Did we take their views into consideration sufficiently? Now, there was a lot of evidence that we were listening to children, but were we doing anything about it? Was the key one there. And some of the timeliness, were we taking too long in our reports and chasing pieces of paper rather than looking at the needs of a child? Were we not, once a child was in care, were we planning for that child's permanence and their lifelong approach to things? And when a child got to an age where they were leaving care, were the plans and the transition plans sufficiently of a quality that was needed? So that was not easy reading for staff and obviously ourselves as the politicians involved. But what we said is, well, there's no point arguing about this, the teams, and I know as a council, you accepted the report, and said, well, okay, what are we going to do about it? And part of that was bringing people like myself in. I'm here for about 6 months. I've been a director in several authorities before and been through the inspection process in both a county authority and in a metropolitan authority. I've been through this ILAX process recently, but I had a lot of experience of it. But that was the idea. We've all, more importantly, about bringing teams in, additional staff, additional social workers, additional team leaders, and the council responded very promptly in terms of putting a fighting fund together from council funds to actually address these needs. And as part of the budget setting process, that's gone ahead. Additional agency staff. I've maybe anticipate a question about agency staff. We only use agency staff that have the qualities and skills that we need. It's not simply a knee-jerk reaction. So we're very careful about the agency staff we use, and we're trying to ensure that we have permanent staff. We have some excellent staff, and we have real stability in a number of the teams. So we want to build on those strengths and take them forward. So part of our plan will be about a staff development and a leadership program. We've got some team leaders that's going forward, an extra strategic manager for management of the process, and importantly, a shadow improvement board. And that shadow improvement board is brought together with lead politicians, with senior officers, representatives, senior police, health, community services are going to be involved as well. DFE want to see how we're developing that, and that's going ahead. And also developing an action plan. And again, maybe anticipating a question, can you see the action plan? We had a meeting yesterday with the DFE and Ofsted where they did a feedback on our latest draft. And the expectation is we have the final draft ready to go to Ofsted on the 13th of August. And so quite happy to bring it or circulate that to members either after that meeting or for the next meeting. And that shadow improvement board is becoming a full improvement board. It will have an independent chair who is the DFE advisor, and a lady called Claire Burgess. Claire's a very experienced professional. I've met her before in a different authority, and she's very sensible, but also politely challenging. And she's very thoughtful about it. But it's good to have somebody like that as part of the team as well. In addition, well, we've been looking at how we improve things. And one of the things that we've been working with teams on is, what does good look like? What would be a good authority? And one of the members of the board was saying, can we visit a good authority? And we're actually teaming up with, as part of the process, we team up with Cheshire West and Chester as our partner. And they'll be doing some work with us on a range of issues. What we're trying to do is, rather than everybody piling in saying we're here to help, we're actually trying to make it a coherent pattern of support. So I've been talking to the director from Cheshire West and Chester, and I've also been talking to the Local Government Association and our DFE advisor and some of our GM colleagues about pulling together packages of support, some mentoring for staff, some staff development work, some work on leadership and quality assurance and auditing processes, so that we get a jigsaw of support that will really drive things forward. We'll get the full plan ready by the middle of August. Going ahead, I understand there's a council meeting on the 17th, which will be looking at the appointments process for this post. And my recommendation is the sooner you get a permanent person in who will drive that progress forward, the better. I mentioned the PIP, our improvement partner, and clearly there's a real cabinet focus on this process with the lead councillor, also the deputy leader of the council, and very much keeping me to account. We have weekly meetings and regular updates. But one of the things we're doing some further work on is the voice of the child about best practice. And just as a minor example about that, about ensuring that there's a children's panel in the appointment process for the director and making young people involved in that. I was at a meeting today with foster carers and about how we work together rather than people finding out, how we engage foster carers and young people as we develop our plans, rather than simply announce them later. Now, that's been a little difficult on the timescale of this improvement plan, but we have a whole range of communications and groups that we're putting together, and also working with frontline staff so that they have an input to the process as well. We're also skilled auditors who can do the case files, who can actually then take the information and not simply do a report, but then work with me and the senior teams and lead counsellor in terms of where are we going with that? What is it telling us? What are the issues we need to address, and where are the strengths that we can build on? Using them appropriately. We're also, I mean, for the cameras, I'd just like to say the noise is off. The cricket, and not comment on my performance. And
let's see what it's like in 6 months.
The idea as well about improving the quality of our social work practice and frontline practice with the early help side of things, and our work with, as you saw earlier, with our health colleagues and police colleagues. But more training and support, improved skill sets, and particularly driving liquid logic. And where I've worked elsewhere in the country, most authorities saying, we can't wait to get liquid logic. When I came here, people said, liquid logic's a bit of a difficult system. I think you're victims of your own foresight, because you've got you were early adopters of liquid logic, and I think you have some older modules. So we're having work done over the summer to update liquid logic to make it much more accessible and much more user friendly. So that'll be going on during July and August, sorry. Mentioned about the front door, the first point of reference for many people, and I know for schools, it's about how you get the documentation sorted and how people get through that front door, or what is that front door for early help, or is it about safeguarding? And we're getting much clearer definitions about what the decision-making process is. And we're developing the early help commissioning strategy with some of our colleagues in the Joint Commissioning Service, and we're doing some longer-term plans for intensive family support within that process. We're also going to review some of our contract for the returning interviews, and you can see the various points there. And for care leavers, that came up again in the meeting this morning about how we support care leavers and prepare them for the life of work beyond being in care. Oh, wrong one. All of that leads into the final plan. As I said, more than happy to bring the plan and how we're updating it. The improvement board will be meeting on a 6-weekly cycle. There will also be a steering group, which I will be chairing, which will meet on a 3-weekly cycle. And what we anticipate doing is the data set and the information we provide to the board would be more than happy to bring to scrutiny whenever you needed it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Jed. Are there any questions? Councillor Carey.
Thank you for that report. I think I was reading the terms of reference of this committee, and on the second point, it does reference here that we are here to review and to scrutinise decisions made or actions taken in connection with the provision, planning and management of children and young people services. And I personally would really like to see some sort of detailed report of why our senior leaders, not the frontline staff, but why our senior leaders did not have any awareness of what was happening. And if it wasn't for this, as it says in the report, if it wasn't for this inspection taking place, they still would not know what was happening. When I've been a councillor here since May last year, and this is quite anecdotal, so if I'm wrong, please just tell me I'm wrong. When in that time, we've had 3 chief executives, we've had 2 executive members for this area, which is a normal process, I know, because we've had a change of municipal year. We've had lots of acting and interim directors and leaders. It does specifically talk about in the report about leadership and management, and I'd just like to see some sort of report that explains why our senior leaders and management were not aware of what was going on. This stuff you're going into is brilliant, and I'm sure it'll have a massive impact, but I'd love to see some. I think until we know exactly what happened, it's very difficult to make an evidence-based plan all these things, I'm sure they'll make, as I've said, a massive impact, and we'll probably sort out most of these problems. But I think we need to be evidence-based, and from what has happened here, we've gone from having a good, without standing for leadership and management, to another report after that, which was a great report in this area, saying this happening, and I think we need to be evidence-based and a report of why. Thank you.
Okay. Kath, sorry. Councillor Hines. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it was just to respond on that really. This obviously that has been brought this evening is a very high level overview. What I think that Jed was referring to earlier, which is the much more in-depth plan, I think does go into a lot more detail, a lot more analysis really, around the different steps that we do need to take and the reasons why we need to take those steps. I think it's obviously incredibly important to reflect on all of the reasons why we're in the position that we are, and it is quite a complex picture. There are things that probably date back a long time, and all of those things I think we absolutely do need to reflect on, because if we don't reflect on those things, then we can't get that plan right. So I think at the next meeting, before the next meeting, we will bring that more comprehensive plan for members to have a look at, and to see the steps that we're taking. The first glance at that action plan really that Ofsted have had, the feedback on that has been that the steps that we are taking would be the steps that they would want to see us take. Clearly, obviously, the key will be in the implementation of that, and we need to make sure that we get that right. But early indications from Ofsted are that we are looking at the right areas. So I think although this is a high level overview, I think it's important that you probably do see a bit more of the detail, and we'll make sure that you get that. Thank you.
Councillor Longdon.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is, have Ofsted given timescales by which specific improvements must be made?
What Ofsted do is publish their report and then expect to see the improvement plan. The normal timescale is that they'll come back and do a monitoring visit within up to 6 months. I've asked them to come a little bit sooner than that, and they're talking about October, November time. And so they don't expect to see, they don't set specific targets themselves. They simply say, that's our report. What are you going to do about it? And then they will come back monitoring visits up to 4 or 6 times over a 2-year period. And then if things are going the right direction, they will come and re-inspect and simply give another report, but they don't set specific targets.
Follow-up question, Chair?
Go on, I'll let you.
Thank you. Bearing in mind that the inspection report placed a big emphasis, as Councillor Carey said, around the paucity in senior leaders' understanding of the quality of social work practice. In terms of the details, I would like to see what performance indicators were being used by the senior leadership team at the time of the inspection, and the latest data they were working to. And to find out from yourself whether those performance indicators were approved by Ofsted, whether Ofsted has approved indicators that all authorities should be working to, so that we can get a sense of whether they were fit for purpose and how they will be fit for purpose moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
If I could, Chair, I think you mentioned earlier you work in schools. Ofsted don't set performance indicators. What they'll do is they'll describe what they expect to see as a good school or a good authority. And then, as those of you who are involved in this, they'll say, and a school or an authority that isn't meeting that good standard is one requiring improvement. But they don't describe what that means. And then they'll say, and one that's exceeding good is outstanding, but they don't actually give lots and lots of detail on what outstanding is. So they give general principles and ideas, but they don't say they would in systems that then uses those management information systems to set their plans and then has an audit process to follow up on the casework that's gone on. So we as an authority will set performance measures and will set success criteria in the plan. The performance measures that we're expecting in terms of staff are are in the code of practices that we use and the practice manuals that we set for them. So we have performance measures, and I'll bring those to the next meeting if that helps. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor New.
Hi, I just wondered, these implementations that we're talking about and the meetings that are taking place at the moment regarding these issues, how are they actually fed to the children's homes and the foster carers? It seems that, we kind of, from what I'm seeing this evening, as though we're quite separate in the two things. There's the kind of the town hall aspect of things, if you like, and the actual children's homes. I just wonder if you could tell me how that's sort of fed and implemented, please.
Yeah, as I mentioned, I was at the Have Your Say group today, which is for foster carers, and talked with the chair, and myself and Councillor Hines are going to be attended that, and we've agreed to go to their regular meetings wherever we can, obviously, because previously it'd been by invitation only, but we've got an open invitation now to attend. So we wanted to build on that. We're also building a communication structure, and we've got the corporate parenting panel, but we've also got the Children in Care Council, and we're using an organisation whose name escapes me now, which have been working with our children and young people in terms of how they engage and get their voice heard more. When you mentioned, sorry, about homes, we're sending an update newsletter to staff and to our homes as well.
Right. Can residential staff attend these meetings as the corporate parents of, the linked children that they're responsible for?
You mean the
People,
ones with the
staff from
Have Your
children's
Say?
homes.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, we are part of the work of the improvement board. Will have a practitioner frontline staff group that we're setting up as well, which will then be able to feed into that improvement part.
Councillor Barclay, did you have a question?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask about the comment made in the report about listening to the voices of the children. I think of all the things within the report, I think that was really something that really struck me the hardest. I think we should always be listening to our children's voices, whether we're kind of our own children or children in care. It's so important. So I just really wanted to ask you, you've said as your approach, you're going to research the best ways to do this, but I would have thought this was the most basic skill that kind of underpinned kind of a lot of council work, whether it be working with adults, working with children. I'm sure there must be some very basic things that need to be in place. Are those in place? Are you checking? I mean, obviously it's important to research, but I would have thought the response would be to also check that the very basic things that you know about are in place. So that's my first thing. And then my second point is it's very interesting to hear about all the things you're going to do. It does sound a really good move, and really appreciate all those efforts. But would it be possible, if the chair is happy with this, to bring an actual case to the scrutiny committee so we can actually learn about what happens to a child, where things were not going right before, how things are going better this time? Because it's actually quite difficult to take from theory and kind of understand where things are improving in practice without knowing about a particular case study. Don't know if you'd be happy with that,
Yeah,
Chair.
I'd be quite happy. Obviously, it would have to be anonymised, but yeah, if you could bring us an example, that would be really helpful.
If I could, Chair, just on that, the voice of the child, you're right, is central to this. And when you do a case file audit, part of the work going through is on their documentation. Again, you may well be aware has the child been spoken to? Has the child been seen separately? Has the child is of an age and ability to actually be engaged in their own plans? And while we seem to be saying, yes, we've done that, when it's analysed, there hadn't been the depth and the engagement of young people in that planning process. So we wanted to make more of that. So the voice of the child should be running through all our plans and then making it real. And part of the feedback process in this improvement plan is if we talk to children who've been through this process, exactly as you described, would they say it's better now or a meaningful exercise? So a case study, as the chair rightly said, if we did one, it would have to be heavily anonymised, or even if we gave a couple of examples, it couldn't be identified in any way. But happy to do that. Yeah. I'm not sure it would be for the next meeting. It might be the one after, if that's all right.
Yeah, that would be January. Councillor Hines.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to pick up a couple of points really that have been raised. On Councillor Longden's point really around performance indicators, Jed's obviously answered that question, but it was really to say that I think what Ofsted observed is that there were some capacity issues in the system. And what was happening is that social workers, as demand had increased, the number of staff hadn't increased, with that demand, and as such, what has been happening is that social workers and staff have been running really to keep up. So we have got a lot of data, but I think as Jed sort of alluded to in the presentation, that data wasn't then being utilised in terms of how the service was being developed. So the monitoring that should have been there hasn't been there, and a lot of that is down to the fact that the capacity wasn't there in the system. So those steps that we've already taken to recruit more social workers and frontline staff, and also to recruit more team leaders, should help to put that back in. And we've also sought advice really from external auditors in how to ensure that quality assurance is certainly there, and we're looking at our own in-house auditing team as well. So all of that capacity that should have been there is going to be in there. So it's not the fact that the performance indicators, we were falling down on that to look at, we should have been doing this but we weren't. It's the fact that we didn't know. And that was the issue. On Councillor New's point, which I think also links into Councillor Barclay's point really around, how do we ensure that we're listening to the voice of the child? Engagement is absolutely key. It's key with young people. It's listening to young people and listening to children, but it's also listening to parents, to schools, to families, to foster carers. We have got lots of groups that are set up, but we also need to engage all of our partners and ensure that this is on the agenda of all of our partners. We've begun that process already. We began that process really some time ago, but the children of the borough are the children of the borough. They are not just the children of the council. So this is something that we need to do in partnership, and we are very much acutely aware of that fact, and that is something that we're absolutely working on.
Thank you. Councillor Longden.
Thank you very much for that detail, Councillor Hines. I can understand, as I'm sure many people tonight and people watching, that there has been a significant increase in the demand for children's services. Like Councillor Carey, I also work, as I said, in a secondary school, and I have seen over the last 5 to 9 years substantial cuts in schools' real terms budgets. That means we're cutting services. For example, a couple of years ago, we lost our full-time counsellor which for our school in particular and the community it serves was an invaluable service. That's one example, and I'm sure I could carry on, but we don't have the time to talk about all those services that have been cut over the years, and they have a drip, drip, drip impact on children and the families, their parents, and the capacity they have to support their children. So I can believe that. I can believe that that is increased. I think what would be useful for this committee, Councillor, if that's possible, and it links into my question around performance indicator information, if we could actually see the statistics of the increase in service use by children in particular in the different parts of the service, I think that would help the committee to get their heads around.
Would it be possible to get that information, perhaps covering the last 2 or 3 years, so we have got a proper comparison?
Absolutely. And just as off the top of my head, I do know that since the last full Ofsted inspection in 2015, the number of looked after children in the borough has increased by 24%, which is quite a massive increase, to 422 since 2015. Yeah, since the last full inspection. So I think the one that you're probably thinking of is the focused inspection. But yeah, so that's massive to 24%.
Okay. Councillor New, did you have another question?
Yeah, thank you for picking up on what I stated earlier. I just purely raised it because I've worked in Trafford children's homes. I've got a strong background, 10 years as a residential social worker, and I think it's really important that it's the children that won't engage that are listened to, because they are the ones that are the most needy. They're the ones that have been through the absolute mill, and whatever it takes to get that voice heard is absolutely crucial. So that is just something that's really important to me. However we need to do it, those children's voices absolutely must be heard.
Thank you. Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you. Can I ask, when up to about 3 or 4 years ago, councillors did the old Reg 33 visits to the children's homes, whereby we were able to talk to the young people, you know, on a one-to-one basis, you know, privately. Now we've got professionals that go in to do these visits. I'd be interested to see some of, you know, of the reports or some of the comments that appertain to their visits, because you know we're not involved with those now. The other thing is that on the fostering panel, family placement team, for the annual reviews for the carers, it was always asked that we have the voice of the child, either in the form of writing. It was suggested that it could also be done in the form of a video. It didn't have to be something that was down on paper. But I think we've got to look at different ways of accessing their views.
Yeah,
and it's also got to be age appropriate. You know, dependent on the situation of the child or the young person. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Blackburn. Are we able to request those reports, do you think, that from the reports from the people speaking to children in care homes? Is it something that we'd be able to?
We can raise the request. There might be, I don't know whether there are data protection or issues, but we can speak with officers and see what we receive, in terms of from our request. And I can email committee members to let you know what the answer is.
Thanks, Fabio. And I do agree with Councillor Blackburn. We need to find every single route possible to hear the voice of the child in every case. I know it's going to be difficult in some cases, particularly with the hard to reach children, but I think we have to do our utmost to do that. Alex?
I was just going to say, last year there was actually a piece of work conducted with the Children in Care Council where a number of children were trained up to be like interviewers, and then they went out and they filmed interviews with members of other children in care. That's now been turned into a video and they've like got all that feedback there. I think that could also be presented to, or well, shared around the committee, or even presented at a meeting if you wanted.
Yeah, that would be really helpful and useful, I think. Is this work ongoing? Do you know that we are still training these young people up to go out and do interviews?
Yeah, once they've been trained, they can then obviously, like, the whole idea of it is to like kind of roll it out further, train more and more children so that they can go out, and it increases the capacity there. It's not dependent upon officers, and so yeah, I think this is an ongoing project. I think it's with Gorse Hill Studios, like a local provider. Yeah, that's something that is ongoing, but I'll find out more for you and get back.
Okay, Councillor New.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that's brilliant. But again, it's really important that we look at the children who are engaging, but we also make a note of the children that aren't engaging, the ones that won't come forward, and we find a way to talk to them to find out why they don't want to engage, because they're usually the ones that have got the most to offer and the most to say. So, you know, pursue it however we can, but just find out who they are so that we can, you know, really sort of get to grips with that, because that's really important.
Absolutely. Okay, have we all done? Did you have one last question, Councillor Longdon?
Thanks, Chair. It's to do with the action plan, just to kind of a few quick questions really linked to the action plans. I'm presuming could you just reiterate when we will get the final action plan, and and presumably there will be timescales attached to each of these actions?
Yeah, we had a meeting yesterday with Ofsted who fed back on our draft.
Yeah.
And I think it's always been said they were complimentary about the story. We were saying, you know, how did we get here, what we were doing, what our priorities were, and how we're planning to get to good. The timescales are that we have to, they'll send some further comments through, and then we have to get our final version back to them by the 13th of August. We've got a meeting of the improvement board, which will be the first meeting of the full board rather than a shadow board, on the 1st of August. So we're wanting to get the plan, the latest version, to that board for them to sign off on the 1st of August, that can go off to Ofsted on the 13th. And obviously then I think we've got a meeting in, is it September, October, we've got a meeting of this board.
Thank you.
Can I also ask as well on the actions, the agreed agency staff to expand intensive family support? Obviously, I'm not an expert in this area, but having read the reports and this overview, it seems to me that that's quite an important service area. That's where you're identifying the key kind of blockages in the system that we've talked about in the report. And agency staff, to me, reads temporary. I would be worried that we don't appoint permanent people to improve the capacity that we talked about earlier with Councillor Hines. Is that the plan? Will that happen?
Yeah, actually, Trafford's quite good in terms of its stability of staff. So we haven't got a huge number of agency staff. And as I think I mentioned earlier, where we are using agency staff, we make very clear that the agency staff have to be quality staff, not simply filling a gap. Sure. And so we've worked closely with the agencies. We've gone outside some of the existing frameworks to where the staff weren't of the quality we needed and gone to other providers. There's a Greater Manchester process, but we've gone outside that where appropriate. So we've reducing the number of agency staff, making a point. We've got interviews this week have been going on. There was a recruitment drive in about May, June, and we're repeating that in September along with adult services and our health colleagues to get a broader range of people to come along and encourage them to apply for posts in Trafford.
Permanent posts?
Yeah.
Permanent posts, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just to say, Stephen, it's not, I don't think it's intentionally agency. I think it's the fact that it's notoriously difficult to recruit, and it's a national issue. So we've got loads of really good things going on to recruit permanent staff, and as Jed has just said, but we have had to bring in some agency staff just because we need to get that capacity in there. But I don't think that's it's not a strategy to bring in agency staff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jed, and to Councillor Hines for a lot of information, a lot of reassurance, and for bringing us the update. Once again, you're welcome to stay. We've not got many items to get through. If you can bear another half hour or so. But, right, okay. Okay, so going to move on to the task and finish report. The final draft, hopefully, this is about version 27, I think. We keep adding to it. Did bring this to Scrutiny Committee in March, I think. We have done some more work on it. We looked at ECHPs as a starting point on our SEND's task and finish group. We met as the paper, I'm not going to read it word for word. We met with senior officers, we met with parents, we tried to get views of people that had very satisfying outcomes, and also from parents that hadn't been quite so happy with their outcomes. We have made a list really scary or worrying in there. One of the common themes throughout seems to be communications, making things clear, setting expectations. We have identified quite a few areas of SEND that we do want to look into more closely and in more detail, and we're going to carry on with the task and finish group in areas. I think we've got referrals, tribunals and exclusions on the list to look into in more depth. But other than that, I would like to present the report as it stands. It's a draft report to Scrutiny for approval, so that we can get it to the executive. Is any questions or
shall I just respond if that's okay?
Oh, yes.
Chair, just well, you know,
Yeah.
just to say, you know, thank you for taking the time to put together such a detailed report with clear recommendations as well, because that's really helpful for us as a service to make sure that, you know, we're doing what you want us to do and we're improving in every way. And again, I suppose just to offer those assurances that Trafford staff, Trafford officers are absolutely committed to working in partnership with you and with all of our stakeholders as well, our parents, our schools, all of those partners that are involved, and obviously across health and social care as well. It's actually really timely in some respects, because we're reviewing the board. We've got our first new board, if you like, well, revised board tomorrow morning. We've reviewed the terms of reference, and those hopefully will be presented and accepted tomorrow. So it's a much more refined strategic board now. We've got elected members on that. We've never had elected members on SEND before, so we've now got elected members. Thank you, Karina, and I know, Kath, you might want to be part of that as well. So hopefully the membership is right and fit for purpose too. There is a clear understanding that the current action plan is no longer fit for purpose. It was addressing the last inspection from 2 years ago now. We're in a different position now. We have learnt a lot, I think, from the inspection of children's services as well, particularly around, you talked about evidence-based, and I'm an educationalist, and I know what it's like, you know, to be absolutely impact-driven and evidence-based, and it's always, but how do you know? How do you know? How do we really know? So we're absolutely passionate to make sure that we seek out the how we know to get those assurances. We are planning to have a SEND review in the autumn term where we'll seek out that external validation. And again, I think that will help us determine whether our evaluation of the service is accurate and whether we're on the right track as well. We've also set up a SEND exec group, which is more senior officers from across education, health and social care to meet regularly to understand where blockages are, because we appreciate there are frustrations in terms of access to specialist services and so on, health, etc. So that is there to absolutely work out where the blockages are and how those are going to be unblocked beyond the SEND board, really. And we're really excited as well. I'm quite glad Justine's here as well, because we've got a visioning day as well, which we're really looking forward to in September, which, you know, I'm really grateful to Trafford Parents Forum for seeking out some funding to enable it to happen. But we've got an independent person who's hopefully going to facilitate that workshop for us. But again, it's a golden opportunity for all stakeholders to have a time to share what we want SEND in Trafford to really be like, where we are now and how we're going to get there, essentially. So I just wanted to offer that response. Yeah. Thank you.
That's fabulous. Thank you so much, Karen, for that, and thank you for your reassurances. Thank you to the members of the Task and Finish group, and to Alex, of course, who have worked so hard. Yeah.
I was just going to ask, just as a matter of the administration of the group going forward, obviously the makeup of the committee has changed this year. So some of the members who had previously been on this Task and Finish group, some are no longer councillors and others are no longer on the committee. So I was just going to say, ask the committee how they would like to proceed in terms of, obviously you will open it up to the committee to be members of the Task and Finish group, but whether they wanted it to be opened up to all scrutiny members or even wider to all councillors, as some other Task and Finish groups have been done.
Okay, I have already been approached by one of our Dan Jerome, who was on the Task and Finish group last year, would like to continue. But anybody else, if you can either email myself and or Fabiola, because Alex is, I think, glad to see the back of us this year. If that's okay, if you're interested in being involved. I think I've certainly enjoyed it, and hopefully the outcomes and the recommendations will be accepted. So can I put the report to the committee for approval for it to go to the exec? Is everybody happy with that? Oh, Linda, sorry.
I'm happy. Could I just ask a question about exclusions? Obviously, we're concerned when young people are excluded because there's more chance that they're going to get involved with alcohol, drugs and gangs. And I think it'd be good if we could, in the future, maybe get some more information as to what happens to those young people that are excluded and what extra help we can support, not just them, but the families.
Yeah, I think it's one of the work streams going forward around exclusions.
It's actually on the agenda, so excuse me, for the October meeting. But we want to do a Task and Finish on exclusions as well. So we're prepared.
Certainly send exclusions features on the send action plan, but we can also obviously provide the information around exclusions as a whole, really, in general. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. If there are no more questions, can we assume the report is approved and presentation to the exec? The next item on the agenda is the Startwell board update. I've got it as a verbal update, but we have actually had a written report. I don't know, is everybody happy to accept the report? Are there any questions on it? I do have a question. There is a place, Councillor Jerome last year sat on the Startwell board as a representative of this committee, and I would ask for a volunteer. The meetings are daytime meetings, so I believe the next meeting is the 29th of August between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m. However, it may be rearranged for the 12th of September due to holidays. I don't know if anybody's available or if you want to have a think about it and let us know if anybody's happy to volunteer to sit on that particular board. Okay. And I've got corporate parenting board, verbal updates. I'm going to pass you to Councillor Hines, who is our brand new chair.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't know I was going to be bringing a verbal update on the corporate parenting board. I am the brand new chair. I have not chaired a meeting yet. So the first meeting that I'll be chairing will be on Thursday. I think for me, the corporate parenting board has functioned really. I've attended a few meetings and they've been really, really comprehensive meetings, but what I think I found, my experiences of being on there, is that there've been a lot of items on the agenda, huge report packs of reports, and all of those reports have been presented as lengthy presentations, which hasn't given, for me, the time that I think is required sometimes for an analysis of those reports and for a really good discussion about those reports, which I think is probably where a lot of the value lies in having these meetings. So the first one that I'll be chairing on Thursday, we've cut down the agenda by probably 2/3. And we've asked that people presenting those reports just give a kind of a 3-minute sort of introduction to the report, and then we get into some really good discussion, because I think, as Councillor New was saying earlier, it is really important that we do have engagement across the piece, really, and the Corporate Parenting Board is a really good opportunity for all of our partners to have a discussion, but also to challenge, really, and for us to challenge one another around what we are doing to support our children and our young people, our care leavers. I also think it's a really important opportunity for us to explore in a lot more detail. At every meeting, we do have representatives from looked after children and from care leavers who attend the meeting. The one that we've got on Thursday, we're actually asking them the question really around, how can we listen better to you, really, and how can we hear your voice more clearly? We are dedicating half the meeting to Ofsted, the next meeting, and that will really be around, again, that opportunity for partners and for corporate parent board members to discuss and to challenge, which, as we say, is really, really important. As I say, I've not actually prepared anything for this meeting, and I think perhaps if I am invited again to attend this meeting after I've at least chaired one meeting, I'll be able to give you a better update on how things are progressing with that. But if anyone's got any initial questions, even if I can't answer them now, I'll be quite happy to take things away and come back to you.
Thank you, Kath. Are there any questions at all? No? Thank you very much, and I will see you on Thursday. Support you in your new role. The last item on the agenda is the work programme for the next municipal year. Councillor Carey and myself met with Jed and Cathy Rooney. I had mailed out to members for suggestions for particular items they wanted to look at. This obviously is flexible and we can expand on any particular themes. Quite happy to get some task and finish groups and maybe even subgroups if there are any particular areas of interest. So if you just let us know, and as I say, it is quite flexible. If there's a burning issue comes up, quite happy to bring one of the items forward or swap and change as we go. So if everybody's happy with that, are there any questions? I'm going to close the meeting. Thank you all for coming. I think we've got through a huge pile of agenda items in an hour and a half. And I wish you all a safe journey home, and let's hope we don't get caught up in the cricket crowds.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Stephen, I emailed Karen your concerns about poor children.
Oh, yeah.